Hello, are you ready to hear a presentation from this guy over here? Well then, I guess it's all up to me then. So, my paper topic covered children of the Delta and how poverty affects them in their lives. I did this by looking at author Michael Copperman, who wrote the story Gone that we read this semester, and I looked at some of his other short stories and his novel about teaching children who were raised in poverty and continue to live in poverty in the future. So to begin, the Delta houses some of the cheapest areas of living in the southern United States. Because of this, a lot of people of different types are drawn to the area so they can try to have an affordable lifestyle and a proper place to raise their children. However, once they get here, they realize that some of the areas are still stuck in the past. And because of this, prejudices, biases, anything like that still exist, and people are outcasted because of this, and the children are the ones who have to suffer based on other old people's lifestyles affecting the present day. So currently, Michael Copperman teaches low-income, first-generation students at the University of Oregon. He began teaching at this university after his time working with Teachers for America because he realized that there were some intelligent students who just could not properly be reached given the current means of the school system in the Delta where he taught. He taught at Promise Upper Elementary for 2 years while living in Promise, Mississippi, a place of about 10,000 people. The experience was so impactful to Copperman that he would frequently use the lives of his students and the events that happened to them as some of the basis of his stories. He also utilizes a sort of mimetic use of African American vernacular English, which is what most of his students spoke, to be a more authentic experience for the audience or reader. One of the biggest themes in Michael Copperman's stories are all with poverty. Poverty, neglect, abuse, they're all there. We see this with the girl Jacqueline in the story Gone, who is actually in another story of his in Teacher, and what later came of her. Copperman's account of the Delta in Teacher, along with some of his short stories, reveal the type of situation that his students live within, being in poverty and in the Delta. He does this to bring awareness to the perpetual abuse and neglect that these students have to go through in these poverty-stricken areas, and how this perpetuates a system that ensures the students will not become successful in their futures and will further be neglected by a system that does not care about them as they are the outsiders. I'd say that the memoir utilizes something called Tragik, which is a German word for afterwardness, which was utilized by our favorite person, Freud, but it's an afterward reflection of traumatic experiences with the gaze of a person's current circumstances. Usually you'll learn something about the experience through this, or just come to terms with what you had to experience. Well, it was surely traumatic for Copperman to have gone through this experience living in the Delta for 2 years. These children aren't so lucky. Whereas Copperman at least had some financial backing from his father and mother, who were a bit more well off, but he was still seen as the outsider since he was of a mixed race, which having a white father and a mixed Japanese mother. So even when he returns now, people look at him and he can just give a sense of, Chinaman, you don't belong here. Although he was frequently called a Chinaman because nobody could really distinguish what he was, nor did they care to find out and remember. As he states in an email interview with me, his book is of a country that is still functionally segregated, and that it covers history, poverty, race, and the state of public schools, as well as the legacy of slavery, restoration, Jim Crow, and persistent segregation. He still worked at a school that, in the early 2000s, believed in corporal punishment. So if you sent your students to the vice principal office, they will be paddled and then sent back. While I tried to avoid this, eventually he just succumbed to a system where if you have no authority in the classroom, kids are going to act up. If they don't think they're going to have a reaction from you, then they will try to take advantage of you because they are constantly being crapped on, so they at least want to crap on somebody else. Which, if you don't have any power, or you don't have any authority over someone, then they will try to take advantage of you. It's not really the children's fault, it is just the way they were raised. And so what do you do when you have a situation like what Jacqueline went through in the story Gone? I asked him if you were able to call Child Protective Services for the students, but he says, I mentioned this in Teacher, but the reality is that CPS/the state were dangerous to call. The state system is renowned for its dysfunction and the abuses that happen within it. Children in state custody are not necessarily better off. That doesn't mean that I wasn't tempted to call and didn't have multiple conversations with my principal about it, especially with the child that was getting beaten every night. Her judgment was that the child would be worse off taken away from his mother. I still do not know if this was true, and as I hope comes across in my piece, my guilt will always persist. And one thing that happens in this piece is like, yes, he definitely feels guilty over what happened. And then going back to what he said about getting a child beaten every night. This goes back to a story with a boy named Aquarius. So Aquarius was a boy who originally did not want to pay attention to class, didn't want to participate, but eventually Copperman was able to get along with him and grow a connection with the boy by relating to each other over kickball. Copperman finds out the boy is really interested in math and was very good at some of his problems. So he was able to eventually get the boy to do his work most of the time. So Michael Copperman decided to try to call the parents home every night and inform them how well their son is doing. But even though Michael Copperman was trying to give good feedback to the student, the mother worked until around midnight because that was the only shift she could work. And when she saw Michael Copperman's name on the caller ID, she assumed that he was still up to trouble. The stepfather would take matters into his own hand and would beat Aquarius with a fan belt every night that they saw Michael Copperman's name on the caller ID. This persisted for about 2 weeks before Michael Copperman was called into an office to ask why I kept trying to call home. And when it was revealed why he was doing it, the grandmother who brought the child sobbed, and even though Aquarius kept asking Copperman to not call every night, and the two grew closer after this. Aquarius and Michael Copperman did get along a little bit better, until one day when Michael Copperman had been up until 1 in the morning working on a lesson plan for the day, but was having trouble getting students to participate. So he called on Aquarius. He wasn't really paying attention, and in surprise, he went, "Woof, what?" And then this caused a chain reaction of 9 other students making animal noises, and Copperman had just lost his crap, sent the 10 of them to the vice principal's office, and then the respect between Copperman and Aquarius was lost. Eventually, Aquarius stopped showing up. His family moved away, and then he beat his cousin over the head 10 to 12 times with a baseball bat after he woke up one day and just through some disagreement. So now he spent a few years in juvenile, and he never was able to finish his high school education. So most of the time, these students don't have a happy ending. And this is prevalent in all of the short stories as well. So we do have Gone, where Jacqueline and her brother Charlie have to sit outside, and that a book which was once a source of happiness and joy for her was turned into a weapon of abuse for Jackie's mother's sugar daddy. There's also a focus on the story of a girl named Felicia, bully against Jacqueline. She had her own issues in her private life. Her younger brother had sickle cell anemia, and he was developmentally stunted from birth. He also lived with his grandma, who could not exactly take care of him the way they should have. The mother was off a few states away, doing some work with the hope that one day the little girl could join her. She was very intelligent, would do well on all of her tests, and she could understand people and how to get under their skin. After she eventually saw Michael Copperman as a father figure, she wanted to help him out by sweeping and mopping after class, up to him and get his attention, because that's really what she wanted. She didn't want him to be left out and not told when she was doing a good job. She actually wanted to be someone to be proud of her. Unfortunately, the mother eventually told her daughter that there was no way that Felicia was ever going to live with her, and this set Felicia up for a complete meltdown where she rejected everything that Michael Copperman told her until she was kicked out of the school. And then several schools later, she was dropped from all programs, and she also did not get her high school education, and Copperman now says she works at a Sonic. But there's always something more. So with the story First Order, the kid is of course within poverty, and he's trying to work up the courage to tell a girl that he likes her through a letter. But she finds out before he gives her the letter that her father has just died, so he realizes that she will never be able to attach herself to anybody as much as she was attached to her father. So he kind of gives up hope at that point. along with Ghostface Auntie. The child just has like two pairs of pants that he cycles through. But he also has an issue of just being an outsider because the aunt and the boy of the story are albino. Although the boy has blue eyes, so he's able to blend in with other white kids. However, he is rejected by his own race for not being black enough, and he's rejected by other white people because they know he's black, just has a different type of skin. So being ashamed of his circumstances and being in poverty, when a woman offers to give him a ride home, he leads her to a different neighborhood that looked a bit nicer so he could pretend to be like a white person, but he mistakenly has her bring him to a museum. She calls him out on it, and she tries to get him to stay in the car, but he kicks her in the face and runs away. This was based on an event that happened in a student's life. He was just trying to get to, Michael Copperman was just trying to get to the bottom of what could have been going through the boy's head. But there was always just an acting out based on people treating him differently or there being some sort of reveal. But they are all embarrassed by their poverty-stricken neighborhoods and households. Nobody wants to grow up with no money and without any opportunity, which is a big thing in these stories. These students have no opportunity because people do not want to care about those who just live in a mud hole in their eyes. Generations of hatred ripple through places that do not offer help to those who are different, and poverty is especially prevalent in minority groups due to a harsh, unrelenting system. This is the side of the Delta that reaches to those who have encountered the worst parts of it in the past. The land haunts those who have run away from it, affecting them in different ways. For those stuck in the poorest parts of the Delta, an exploding anger ticks along, waiting for a moment of release, and the ones who escape either only visit the place in sleepless nightmares, or when they lend a hand to those in need.